Sachas Kiddushin Daf Mem Gimel continues the Gemara's discussion of the halachas of shlichos. We have two primary sugyas, a continuation of the sugya of shliach ledvar avera, and then the sugya of shliach nase eid. So as far as shliach ledvar avera, we have seen that for most halachas in the Torah, if you make a messenger to do an avera for you, he is responsible for making the decision to go through with it. He cannot blame you. He cannot blame the sender and say that he told me to do it. We say divrei Rad, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishayim. The exception to that we've seen is me'ilah. The Gemara is trying to figure out why didn't we learn from me'ilah to the rest of the Torah that there is a shliach ledvar avera, and you do blame the mishalech, the sender. So the Gemara has answered because you have me'ilah and shlichos yad, or if somebody uses or has a messenger use a item that he is supposed to be watching and guarding and not using, that he's responsible for the activities of the shliach as well. So the Gemara therefore says the shnei ksuvim b'am ke'achad ein malamdim. So now the Gemara is asking that which we said that halacha is true by shlichus yad is only according to Beis Hillel. According to Beis Shammai, there's no such halacha by shlichus yad. So where is your two psukim? You don't have two psukim. You only have one me'ilah. So learn from there to Kal Torah Kula that there is a shliach ledvar avera. So the Gemara answers that Beis Shammai will tell you there is another halacha where the Torah says that there is no shlichus, where the Torah says that there is shlichus ledvar avera, that is, and therefore you have those two. You have me'ilah and this one, and it's shnei ksuvim b'am ke'achad ein malamdim. What is this other one? So it's tvicha mechira, the halacha that if you steal a cow or a sheep and you sell it or you slaughter it, you have to pay 4 or 5 times the value. And there we have a halacha that you say yesh shliach ledvar avera. What's the source for that? So that is a bit of machag. Zomar quotes a brisa. One source is that it links tevicha to mechira. It links slaughtering to sale, just like sale involves someone else. You can't sell to yourself. You need another person there. Slaughtering also is included where it's someone else who's doing the slaughtering. You have another person involved. That's one source. Another source is from the Bei Rabbi Shmuel, who says where it says tavachai oy mecharei, the word oy is to include even a shliach, and the Bei Chizkiya says where it says tachas, that somebody can be in place of the original owner, that includes the shliach. So you have these three sources. We say therefore there is shlichus ledvar avera b'tvicha mechira, that combined with me'ilah is shnei ksuvim b'am ke'achad and ein malamdim, and therefore everywhere else you say ein shliach ledvar avera. So when it asks, now you know there's a machagis whether shnei ksuvim b'am ke'achad malamdim or not. This all works according to the man yamar ein malamdim. What are you going to say according to the man yamar malamdim? So the answer is because you have a pasuk of shchutei chutz, where if you slaughter a carbon outside the Beis Hamikdash where there's kares, and that clearly says that only applies to the one who actually slaughters it. You can't blame your mishalech. There we say ein shliach ledvar avera. We learn from there to Kal Torah Kula that ein shliach ledvar avera. How do you know that that's true by shchutei chutz? Because it says dam yechashev lo ish hahu, dam shafach hu, so hu v'lo ishlucha. It's him and not his mishalech. Him and not his shliach. It has to be the person himself who violates this iser. So the Gemara asks, okay, so you have shchutei chutz where it clearly says, we have a drasha that says ein shliach ledvar avera. You have me'ilah where we say yesh shliach ledvar avera. How do you know which one to learn from? How do you know which one to apply to Kol HaTorah Kula? So our answer is because when the discussion of shchutei chutz, you have another extra word. It says hahu again. It says v'nichas ha'ish hahu, and that's to say if it doesn't apply to there, you say that it's l'chol HaTorah Kula, to say that to say that ain't shliach ledvar avera by all other halachas in the Torah which we learn from shchutei chutz. So where it says now, according to the man yamar shnei ksuvim b'am ke'achad ein malamdim, we don't need these two drashas for what is the word hahu for. So where it says one is to exclude where you have two people holding the knife together and doing the shechita. It has to, the only kares is where there's one person who's doing it by himself, and the second ahu is to exclude someone who's an einus, he was forced, or he's a shaygig, or he's made a mistake, he didn't realize what he was doing. Now, what does the original one hold? How does he learn those halachas? He learns from the hey of ha-hu. You don't have to have two heys there, could have just said hu. The extra hey is for the drasha, and the one who doesn't have that says you don't make a drasha from extra heys. The Gemara now asks, you have a brisa that has another halacha where we say yesh shliach ledvar avera. The Gemara brings a brisa from Shammai Hazaken, who says that if somebody makes a messenger to commit murder, it says go and kill that person. So the sender is chayav. We say yesh shliach ledvar avera. So where does it get that halacha from? So the Gemara says, simple. Shammai Hazaken holds shnei ksuvim b'am ke'achad malamdim. You do learn when you have something written twice. You do learn from there to everywhere else in Kal Torah Kula, and therefore he learns from me'ilah and tvicha mechira to everywhere else. Now, he does not have that limiting drasha where we say that you learn from shchuti chutz to everywhere else. That drasha he doesn't hold of. So the Gemara says that's one shot. Second shot is that when he says chayiv, he doesn't mean that you're really chayiv. It doesn't mean that you really blame the sender. That's chayiv b'dinei shamayim. But b'dinei adam, you can't make a person responsible for that because we say ein sheich l'dvar avera. So Gemara says, so then the Shammai Zakani was arguing on the Tanakama. The Tanakama said potter, so he also holds potter. So what's the difference? Obviously, the Tanakama would agree that he's chayiv in a dinei shamayim. So Gemara says the difference is what kind of einish you'll get in a dinei shamayim. Is it a big one or is it a little one? That is the difference between them. Now, the Gemara says the second answer for why Shammai Hazaken holds that in the case of murder, you say yesh shliach l'dvar avera, and that's because there's a special gzeres hakasav in the sugya of murder, where it says oisi harakta b'cherev b'nei amayin, you killed him with the sword of b'nei amayin. This is referring to where David HaMelech sent Uriah Hachiti to the front lines to be killed in order that he should be able to take his wife Bathsheba, and therefore he's being blamed for it. And therefore you see that the sender is responsible for it, and there is your Gzeres HaKosov, that yesh shliach l'dvar avera. Now the one who disagrees says that what this means is to say that you're not responsible for it, meaning just like you're not responsible for Chev b'nei Amayin, what the Amayni kill, you're not going to be punished for the death of Uriah Hachiti. What's the reason? Even though he sent him to be killed, he deserved it because al pi halacha he was chayav misa, because he was a murdered b'machas, he rebelled against the king, and he did that when he referred to Yoav, who was a eved for David. He was the general of David's army, but Uriah referred to him as Adoni, referred to him as my master. You cannot refer to someone else as a master in front of the king. And he said, Adoni Yoav v'chol avdei Adoni al pnei hasada chayim. He said, my master Yoav and all his soldiers are in the field. Now, the Gemara concludes this discussion with one final halacha. Rava says, according to our first understanding of Shammai Hazaken, that he holds shnei ksuvim habayim ke'echad melamdim. You can learn from the two sources we saw where yesh shliach l'dvar avera to kol ter kula, and he does not hold of a drasha of shchuti chutz. So therefore, it would seem to be that he holds that in kol ter kula you say yesh shliach l'dvar avera. Says Rava, there's an exception to that, and that's where there's a hana. So if he sends a shliach to do a bia of an iser or to eat chaylev, certainly the shliach, the one who's over the aver, is the one who's responsible for it, and he's the one who gets the einish, and the sender is potter. He doesn't get anything. It cannot be that the shliach gets the hana, and the sender is the one who's going to be chayiv for it. The Gemara now introduces the subject of shliach nasa aid. Can a messenger who's doing something also be a witness that that thing itself occurred? That is, if he's being Kiddushin Isha on behalf of his Mishalech, can he be a witness to that Kiddushin? If he's paying back a loan, can he be the witness that it was actually paid? Can he join together with another aid, or can he have two shlichim, both being aidim? What's the halacha there? So Rav says, yes, a shliach can be an aid, and the Debei Reb Shila says it cannot be an aid. What's pshat in this machlekes? The Gemara tries two attempts to explain it. The Gemara's first attempt is that the Debei Reb Shila hold because he did not appoint him to be an aid. You have to be appointed to be a witness in order to be a kosher witness. So the Gemara rejects this because you don't have to appoint a witness. If you do Kiddushin in front of two people and you don't say you are my witnesses, the Kiddushin is valid and they count as the witnesses that make it valid. So therefore it can be that the problem is that he didn't say Atameda. So the Gemara therefore says an upshat. The machlekes is that Rav says the fact that they are involved makes it even stronger. Their testimony is even stronger. And the Rav Shila says since he's involved, and since we say Shliach Shalom Kamaisa, he himself is like the sender, it's like the person himself. It's like the person himself. He's a karev. A person is considered to be related to himself. And therefore he cannot be a valid witness on something which concerns himself, in this case, his sender. Now the Gemara asks we have a brisa which brings a machlokes, but both sides seem to hold ein shliach nasa. A shliach cannot be a witness. Brisa is discussing if somebody says to three people, go be mekadesh a woman for me. So according to Beis Shammai, two of them can be witnesses and the third one can be the shliach. According to Beis Hillel, all three were made a shliach, therefore none of them can be witnesses in shliach nasa aid, and you have to go get someone else to be the actual aid. So the Gemara says both opinions here hold that you can't have one person do a role of both a shliach and an aid. The question is one person a shliach or all three shliachim? But everybody agrees whoever's a shliach can't be an aid. So how could Rav therefore hold shliach nasa aid? So the Gemara says you're right. This brisa holds clearly you can't say shliach nasa aid. Rav goes like a different brisa, which Rabbi Nassan brings his machlokes to Beis Shammai differently, and there Beis Shammai says you don't have to have three people, even if you only have two people. One's a shliach and one's a aid, and the shliach could be an aid as well, and therefore it's good. And Misol says you have to have 2 witnesses and a shliach besides. So the Gemara says, and it comes out that Rav holds like Beishamai. How could that be? So the Gemara says, no, switch it around, switch the opinions. Beis Hillel was the one who said that it's good, and Rav was holding like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara says, Rav Acha Brei de Rava had this entire machlokes brought down in the opposite. Rav was the one who said a shliach cannot be an aid, and the Rav Shila said a shliach could be an aid. Halacha l'maisa, the Gemara paskins shliach nasa aid, and the shliach is able to function as a witness. On that note, the Gemara quotes a halacha that Rava says in Rav Nachman. Somebody says to Shlichim, be my witnesses to be Mekadesh a woman for me, be my Shlichim to be Mekadesh a woman for me. They can be the Shlichim, and they can also be the witnesses, clearly holding Shliach Nasa aid. The Gemara says that works by Kiddushin, by Gerushin, that is to bring a get and do a divorce, and by Dini Mamanis, that is to pay back a loan which is owed. So says the Gemara, why do I have to have all 3 of these halachas spelled out explicitly? So the Gemara answers, if you would have only said Kiddushin, I would think there you can trust the shliach to be an aid, because why would he lie? All he's doing is making this woman usher to everybody. He stands to gain nothing from that. However, in a situation of divorce where he's making her mutter, maybe he's lying because he wants to marry her, and therefore he's creating the illusion of her becoming mutter to everyone. Now, if you would say that, you still wouldn't know in the case of Momen, because here you have 2 witnesses that are shlichim, and therefore if you're talking about divorce, they can't both marry her, so one of them must be telling the truth. They don't both have that plan. However, in the case of money, they could be in cahoots, and they could be planning on splitting the money, and therefore maybe I shouldn't believe them there, even if I do believe them by the divorce. And therefore you have to say all 3 of these halachos. Now, the Gemara asks, why should you believe them? They should be negeya be'edus, that is, they stand to gain personally from their own testimony. Because this is in the case of the monetary shlichus. The Gemara asks, when the borrower gave the money to the shlichim to go return it to the malva, to the lender, they are going to have to give it back to him if they don't fulfill the role. If they don't establish that they did the job and gave it to the malva, they have to return it to the leva. So by them testifying that they gave it to the malva, they are exempting themselves from having to return it to the leva. So therefore, they are relevant, they are negeya to it, and their testimony is giving them personal gain, that they don't have to return the money to the leva. So the Gemara says, hold on a second, it really depends whether they would be required to prove that they returned it. And that depends on a machlokes called a mavas chaver be'edim tzarich lefar be'edim or not. When the leva gave the money to the shlichim, if they want to claim that they gave it back to him, do they have to prove it or not? So if there was no proof that they ever received it, they could deny they ever received it, and we don't have to worry about it at all. Obviously, they don't have to prove that they gave it back because there's no proof that they ever got it. However, what if the leva gave it to them in front of witnesses? So you have a machlokes whether they have to return it with witnesses or they would be trusted to say they gave it back. If they're trusted to say they gave it back, so then they stand to gain nothing from saying they gave it to the malva, because if they're liars, they could always just say they gave it back to the leva and they don't have to prove it. Because however, if you hold the Mavas Chaver Be'edim Tzarech Lefar Be'edim, so they have to prove in front of witnesses they gave it back, and they wouldn't be able to prove that because it never happened. Now, if you believe them, they gave it to the Malva, they will have established then that they don't pay it back to the Leva. Now they stand to gain from what they had. So therefore, they should be considered to be Negeya Be'edus. Says the Gemara, obviously here, therefore, Rav and Rav Nachman must hold this malva eschar be'edim, ein tzarich lefar be'edim, and that's why you don't stand to gain from it. And the Gemara points out, now that they have to swear, the Rabbanim were mataken Shuas Heses, they would not be believed to say they gave it back to the malva, they gave it back to the leva without swearing, that they don't owe it anymore. The Shuas Heses, even though they're not made of mixes, we have a lacha of Shuas Heses, midrabanan, you have to swear if someone claims you owe him money and you say you don't owe anything. And therefore, by saying that they gave it to the malva, they avoid having to swear altogether, and therefore they definitely are negeya. Now, if the malva himself will go ahead and swear that he never received it, he'll be believed, and the leva will have to pay again to the malva. The Gemara now refers back to our Mishnah. We saw the halacha that a father can accept Kiddushin for his daughter. The Gemara now wants to discuss, is it possible for the father and the daughter both have the ability to accept Kiddushin? Is there any age at which that's true? So while she's a ketana, under age 12, most definitely only the father could be makabel a get or Kiddushin. We'll see machlokes first by get, by divorce, then we'll talk about Kiddushin. So as far as the get, if she's a Naira, is a Machlekes, the father certainly can be Makabel the get for her. The question is, can she be Makabel it for herself? Gemara brings a Mishnah, says the Tanakama says that as long as she's just from Erisin, she never had Nisuin, the father can be Makabel the get, and she can be Makabel the get herself once she's a Naira. Rabbi Yehuda said, no, only the father. You cannot have two hands. You can't have two different people able to be Makabel the same get. Only the father, not her. The Mishnah continues and says that any woman who's not smart enough, that means she's not old enough, mature enough, or she's not functional enough to be able to guard the get that she has, which means that she understands the concept of divorce, cannot be divorced. And even if the father is Makabel for her, she's not divorceable in a stage like that. Now, that's machlekes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda about Gittin. What about Kiddushin? So Rish Lakish says the same machlekes applies to Kiddushin. Rabbi Yechon says about Kiddushin, there is no machlekes. Everybody agrees, only the father and not her. That means to say that the Tanakama does not argue by Kiddushin. He agrees by Kiddushin that she cannot be Makabel her own Kiddushin. Now, what is the reason? How come the Rabbanan make a difference between Gittin and Kiddushin, whether she could be Makabel her own or not? So Yosef Rechanina explains, very simple. In a divorce, she is leaving her husband's rishus and going into her father's rishus. She is giving herself back to her father, so she can do that. Why shouldn't that not be within her ability to do that? However, Kiddushin, where she's leaving her father's rishus, the father has to be the one to give that away. And she cannot give that away on her own. It's the father's rishus, and it has to be up to him to let it go. Now, the Gemara asks the question, now, what about Maimer? What about the Kiddushin of a Yavam to his Yevimta? He's really supposed to do Yibum, not Maimer, which is Kiddushin of a Yavam. However, such a thing does happen. And there we have a Mishnah that specifically says that it's only with the agreement of the father. That's if it's Minha Erisin. And the Nara, that for a Ketana has to be with the agreement of the father, but for a Nara, she could do it herself. Now, you should have the same thing because he's going out of his rishus, and therefore she should not be allowed to do it herself. So therefore, the Gemara looks for another explanation, which we'll see on the next daf.